G'day, ZiggyD here, and welcome back for another Path of Exile Patch 1.3 skill gem analysis and first impressions. In this video I'm going to be going over the 3 new counterattack gems, Vengeance, Reckoning, Riposte, which you can see having nice looking effect here on screen at the moment. I am passively killing enemies. Yes, it's even more possible now to make passive AFK builds if you would so desire. I don't think that's going to be the main use of these skills, however. What these skills do achieve is a nice DPS boost for two-handed builds, a nice DPS and utility boost for true melee characters, ones that get in toe-to-toe with their enemies, and a nice utility boost in general for melee characters. So these are pretty nice trigger gems, pretty nice counterattack skills. I like their addition to the game quite a bit, and it makes melee a lot more fun to play in my opinion. So, just destroyed that pack with just the counterattacks, but let's go back here and I'm going to go over each of the 3 gems individually first, and then I'll do some analysis of some of the implications that they might have in builds. So we'll start off with Riposte. Now, Riposte or Riposte. This skill can be used with dual wielding or weapon and shield, so one-hand weapon and shield, and it triggers on block. It has a 100% chance to trigger on block. Quality gives increased damage. You can see that 13% damage for 13% quality, so no real utility change there, but it suits the theme of this particular counterattack as a damage dealer. This one doesn't have so much utility as the other trigger gems, but it does have very nice damage potential. So, what happens if you trigger this while dual wielding? You'll attack with both of your weapons at once. And I'll go find some enemies here because I want to show you guys something pretty cute about this particular skill. So, there is a couple monkeys just there. Now, if I have a sword in my main hand, you'll see that the animation will be a sword. If I switch these around, the animation will be a hammer. There you go. So that's just kind of like a cute little detail about the skill. But if you are dual wielding, it uses both of your weapons. Now you can see I'm still killing things with this, even though I have one good weapon and Brightbeak. Like, Brightbeak's obviously very, very low damage, but I'm still doing good damage because it's this damage plus this damage, and attack speed is not considered because it has its own cooldown. The cooldown on Riposte seems to be about a second. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's quite fast. So if I can get this to trigger, you guys can see it just down there. It looks like about a second, right? So unless you're like a max block character constantly blocking, it's going to go off most of the time when you block. The exception is if you block while it's on cooldown, it's not going to go off. So that's essentially how the cooldown works. Now, if you're thinking about using multiple copies of Riposte, most skills in Path of Exile share a global cooldown if they are the same skill. So it's the same with Enduring Cry and Traps. And Riposte is no different, so you can't use multiple copies to kind of bypass this cooldown. Essentially, you can use one and you have the cooldown, but you can use the different trigger gems together, and we'll talk about that in a bit in the future. But I can use this with one-hand weapon and shield as well, and it will trigger on my shield block. So you can trigger on dual wield block or shield block. I'm not sure if this works with staff block. I imagine it does. It doesn't say anything here. It just says uses both weapons while you're dual wielding. I haven't been able to test with staves, but it should work with staves. So that's a potential single target counter for staves as well. Now I think this will have a bigger impact on PvP than it will on PvE, I imagine. Because it's a damage dealer to single target, that kind of makes a fair bit of sense. But it's still a nice way to boost damage against bosses, or against rares, or against just in general, just a bit of extra passive damage. And you can link that, of course, to any damage dealers like Melee Fizz and Added Fire. Things like faster attacks and multi-strike do not work. If I link it to multi-strike, you'll see that it actually does not support the gem because it has a cooldown, and I guess they didn't want multi-strike to bypass the cooldown. So you can't get it to strike 3 times in a row. That would be pretty damn strong. But this is basically just a damage dealer. You could link Curse on Hit or something like that to it if you wanted to, but I think this is mostly going to be a damage dealer, and this is going to be a really nice damage dealer, I think, for slower hitting characters with high damage. So if you're playing like a slow hitting one-hand axe build, or if you're, I guess a stave build might be perfect with it then if you have slower attack speed but hit very strong, then Riposte could do pretty damn high damage. So that's a pretty nice gem. I think this is going to see the least use in PvE, however. It might be chucked on some PvE characters, but it won't be the most useful. So, the next ones we have, I'm going to go over Reckoning next. Now this one, actually, I shouldn't switching the shield out, works only with a shield block. So this one you need to be using a shield because essentially it's actually a shield bash. Now the way that this one is it triggers, again, 100% of the time on block with your shield, and it triggers a shield bash in the direction of the enemy that is blocked. So you can see that going off just there. It deals pretty nice damage based on your weapon damage, not based on your shield damage. They don't have anything like that in the game just yet. But it is an AoE. Now the quality on this gem increases the AoE. I believe it is 0.5% AoE per quality, so you get 10% increased AoE quality, and obviously you can get any other AoE increases. You can use the AoE gem or anything like that, and you should, because it's tagged AoE, be able to use Conk Effect to increase the damage as well, in addition to things like added fire and melee fizz. All of that sort of jazz works. Now this one is, I think, the sort of the middle ground of the three skills, I guess, on the DPS utility spectrum. Because it is an AoE and because you can increase the AoE, it can be used to apply curses in shield block builds. So if you're playing like a very high block character, you got 50-60% block chance, then you can use this to apply curses. On my character, I only have very low block chance, but you can still see it goes off every now and then. So even on my character, it would be decent utility if I were using a shield. My shield block is chance to block attacks only 30%. So that's essentially the same as the base chance on Vengeance on getting hit, right? 30%. So you don't really need high block to make this useful, essentially. But obviously higher block is going to have a decent bonus there. I did actually just notice the cooldown times on the tooltip for these guys. So this one has a cooldown of 0.4 seconds, whereas Riposte has a cooldown of 0.8, so it was close to a second, like I was saying. Now, Reckoning has a cooldown of 0.4 seconds, and I did notice that this was quite a bit shorter when I was using it, which means that if you are a max block character, it's going to go off pretty damn often. 0.4 seconds is pretty frequent. My block chances, not sometimes, I guess if I'm lucky, it's going to go off right when it goes off cooldown. But if you're like a character who's blocking all of the time, this is going to go off very, very frequently. You're going to get this machine gun shield bash thing happening. So this is going to be a potentially very strong DPS skill as well as the utility that I mentioned earlier. So I think Reckoning is pretty damn cool. I'm sure it will have some applications in PvP as well for one-hand shield characters, because it can go off pretty quickly against a character that attacks very fast. If you're playing against a double striker or something like that, then you're going to be able to block pretty often and get a lot of those to trigger, and the damage is going to be pretty decent. Now you'll notice it deals 72% of base damage. I should be able to level this up here, and you can see that that increases up to 74%. So this actually increases as a more multiplier, because it's a percentage of base damage. It increases, and I think that goes to over 100%. So you can actually get pretty damn nice damage with that. And then the final one here, let's put these two aside, is Vengeance. And this is the one I've been using on my character just here. This works with any weapon set and is most aligned towards armor-based characters that are taking a lot of hits. Now this has a 30% chance to counterattack on this skill when directly hit, and it has a 1.2 second cooldown time. So if you're in melee combat, if you're in true melee combat, this is going to be going off all the time, just with the 30%, all the time when it comes off cooldown. You'll see it comes off cooldown, pretty much goes off whenever it comes off cooldown, as long as I'm surrounded by a few enemies that are attacking me. So the quality bonus on this increases the chance for it to trigger. At 20%, you get 40% chance to counterattack. I don't think that is super useful in most PvE scenarios. I don't know, maybe that will be some useful on some PvP characters or something. I don't think this is a very PvE-oriented skill, and this is a nice way to get really good AoE damage passively on two-handed specs, on facebreaker specs, and for other specs like myself, I'm a very fast attacking character with low single hit damage. It's a mild DPS boost, but what it really is a utility boost. This I'm currently using linked with Curse on Hit and Assassin's Mark, and it is keeping my power charges up. So that has been like a fantastic automation for my character. It's kind of similar to using something like custom damage taken with a curse. Essentially, as you're taking damage, you're cursing enemies, but it gives you a damage dealing alternative for that as well, and it works pretty well. I do some damage, despite not having very big single hit damage. I do some damage with this. It's going to be just about time for me to refresh on this character, so I don't lose any XP. But I'm a big fan of especially Vengeance. Is probably my favorite. I think Reckoning is pretty cool, but Vengeance, just for the utility it offers, just for the automation it offers, melee characters is like a big boost for me. I usually don't like melee characters all that much, but these sorts of additions are what allow me to really enjoy these sorts of characters. So I think that people will use this in a few different ways. You could use this if you're a spellcaster using daggers. for example, or scepters, you can actually use this as a defensive sort of thing. You can have something like knockback on it, or you could use it to just curse enemies if you're a spellcaster still. Like if you're a more melee spellcaster, like a lightning tendril, crit dagger spellcaster, for example. You don't need to use this on just melee characters. You can use it for utility on spellcasters, but on melee characters, it's a very nice boost. A nice, you know, an okay damage boost, passive damage boost for characters like myself, but this is a very nice buff for two-handed characters because it has a pretty long cooldown, right? And it's mostly going off on cooldown. You know, you would not attack once every 1.2 seconds with pretty much any spec in the game. So the slower the attack speed, the heavier the hit, the better this is going to be for damage. So a really good buff to slow attacking two-handed characters. Now, as you guys saw at the start, you can use all three of these skill gems together if you are a shield one-hand character. It's going to be better if you're like an armor-based shield one-hand character like myself, for example, because then you're going to be getting hit, you're going to be blocking, and when you block, you trigger both the single target counterattack and the shield bash counterattack, and when you don't block and when you get hit, you're going to trigger the AoE counterattack. So it is possible to use all three of these together. I think there are going to be some cases where that is useful. I think Facebreakers can use all three of these together. I saw Xeno recently was using at least two of these. He might have been using three of these together. So there are going to be some cases where it's going to be pretty nice to use all three of these together. And if you want to create a more automated character, then you can do that. And especially if you're creating like a true melee automated character, like an Infernal Blow character, something like that, or a Heavy Strike melee splash character, and you're getting in there, then that's going to be a nice way to give yourself a lot more AoE damage, especially as well, because this attacks in any direction. Whereas if you're attacking, with something like Heavy Strike, you're only really attacking in just that, that targeted mob. So, possible to create automated characters, utility for some melee characters, and extra damage for other melee characters. I think these are fantastic additions to the game. I think they're going to see a lot of use. I think most melee characters are going to rock at least one of these, because there's very few situations in which they are not useful. The final thing I kind of wanted to mention was the block versus armor versus evasion sort of thing. If you are an evasion character, then only really the block ones are going to be useful for you, because if you're evading attacks or dodging attacks, or if you're acrobatics evasion, which is pretty popular, then you're not going to be trigger vengeance, which is the big AoE, which is the utility based one. So this is the addition of vengeance is a bit of a buff to armor-based builds. You guys will probably be happy to hear that, because armor needs some love. I think a lot of people agree on that, and this is a buff for armor-based characters, because this is only triggering if you're getting hit, and it's it's the best of the three in terms of utility, and pretty nice as well for damage. So it's going to be this is as I was talking about more multiplier in this one. I have this at level 17 and it's dealing 107 of base damage in an AoE, so it's an auto attack to all targets in an AoE. That's actually pretty good. Most AoE skills have like a negative multiplier on them, so it's actually pretty good damage as well. So that is a nice little buff to armor characters. Anyway, guys, I think that's about it. If you have any other questions or comments on these skills, do leave them in the comments below. That is it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.